podcast. This is Marc Sims, and this is just a few questions. I have Benny J on the. Ben, you on the show? On the line, rather?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, you here? Okay, cool. Ben Joravsky is here, and Benny J, you are a talk show host. But really, you're a writer for the Reader, right?
Yes, sir.
For 40 years? How long?
I think it's 4,522 years to be exact, Marc Sims. I started writing for the Reader as a freelancer in about 1984, and I've been writing for them as a full-time writer since 1990, so it's a long time. And I did a story about you, do you remember? In 2001,
Man,
I want to say.
I don't.
That right?
I can't remember. How did you call me? Or usually, I work reporters are trying to get on somebody. Please write about me, and then they finally do, right? So I don't know how you found me, but you called me first, right?
Yeah, I called you first. You had a cable access show that I loved,
Hey.
So I called you and I watched some of your shows. I interviewed some of your guests. And I've written about you twice. And then I used to turn to you for funny lines.
I know.
Down through the years. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, I could have been somebody, Ben, but I just didn't have the chops, man.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But I wanted your show is a podcast. I was on your old radio show. Remember that?
The one I was fired from?
Yeah, you were too liberal for the liberal station, right?
Yeah, man. That's too liberal for the liberal station.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they let you go. But that's radio. That's what radio does. They fire people.
That's what they
do.
Yeah.
But the podcast. How has the podcast been going? I can hear it via the Reader and the Chicago Sun-Times. The Chicago Reader is a newspaper. Chicago Sun-Times is a newspaper. It's all online, of course, and a newspaper. You get the hard copies, don't you?
What's that?
You get the real paper.
Yeah, of course. I say that all the time on the show. Yep, I get 3 newspapers home delivered every day.
But you do politics. Politics is boring. Not on your show, but it tends to be boring for most Americans.
Stop it. People love politics. You love politics.
No, but I'm saying, but half the country doesn't vote, Ben.
Well, that's true. But see, what percentage of the country doesn't watch the Super Bowl? I'd say half the country doesn't watch the Super Bowl, but we don't say the Super Bowl is boring.
No, some people would probably say this year's Super Bowl is going to be great because the Bears are playing next year rather.
But your point's well taken.
Yeah.
Not enough people participate in politics. I don't know if it's because it's boring. I think we talk about this all the time. I think so many people in the country are just alienated from politics. They just don't think it affects them. They don't want to get involved. They're suspicious. They don't trust politicians. So I don't know if it's boring. I wouldn't say it's boring. I would just say that.
Yeah, but you go deep into the weeds, but you make going deep into the weeds of politics fun. You have a lot of fun. You and Dennis joke it up. The guests yak it up. It's really, really fun.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
I'm not buttering you up. It's really true. But one thing about you, Ben, you have a lot of different kind of people on your show, which is good. And
what do you mean by that?
You know what I mean? I mean, you have a very diverse audience and diverse guests. You know what I'm saying? I mean, even yours truly. Now, okay, let me ask you something, Ben. Do you hear vacuum? No, it's cool. It's driving me crazy. A vacuum is going on right now. Next door upstairs, I'm driving me crazy. You know, when you broadcast, like Dennis hears everything like candy paper, people opening up lifesavers. It drives me crazy. It drives me crazy. But, you have a lot of different kind of people. And I say that to say this. Benny J, you're an integrationist.
What do you mean by that?
You want us to all, it's like, I can't recite the words. I meant to write them down. The lyrics of Zoom from the Commodores or whatnot, Lionel Richie and the Commodores, right? You want us to all live as one, man.
Yeah.
You want everybody to be happy and integrated, and it's just, just beautiful, man. Because remember, we live in...
I don't know if happy and integrated are the same thing, but I do want everybody to be happy and integrated. Yeah, it's true. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, in the sense that, we live in Chicago. You live on the north side. I live on the south side, the integrated Negro section of Chicago. You know what I'm saying? And it's been that way for over...
Ladies and gentlemen.
No, but I'm saying it's been that way for like 100 years. Literally, it's less integrated on the north side. But let's face it, the rich live in one part. Most of the town, Chicago's working class. It's just like a reflection of the country. Chicago's a majority minority city. Most of the people who have money, if you will, not all, but most, are European Americans, blah, 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 blah. And here we are. And is it ever going to change in our lifetime, Ben?
Well, it's getting worse, actually, Mark. I'm unlike you. I'm not from Chicago. I moved here. I was already close to when I moved here full time. Oh gosh, I was 25 years old, and I settled on the north side. The north side back in those days, in 1981, was a lot more integrated than it is now. And I could tell you about whole neighborhoods that have transformed over the last 40 years. And when I say transformed, they've gone from black to white. The area around, I don't know if you're familiar with it because you're a South Sider, but the area around with the old Cabrini Green housing project over on Division and Wells, Halstead, in between there. Uh, when I first moved to Chicago, that was a completely black neighborhood, and on both sides of Cabrini Green, north and south of it. And now it's overwhelmingly white and upper class or upper income. So the city is becoming less integrated, in my humble opinion. We're going in the opposite direction since I moved here back in 1984.
You would agree, Ben, whether it's Chicago or throughout the country, birds of a feather flock together. Most people rather live in a neighborhood with everybody, or most people look like them.
I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that at all. I feel you make it seem as like it's a choice. I think people think they're making a choice when in fact the choice is being made for them by forces greater than them. So I don't know if what you're saying is true. I will agree. I will make this concession to what you're saying, Mark. People aren't going to fight for integration. It's not at the top of the list of things that they're going to fight for. So, we talked a lot about the programs of Mayor Rahm and Mayor Daley, and over the last 30 years, and how they've worked to make Chicago more segregated by income and race, and nobody resisted any of those programs. In fact, they were widely supported by many people, or folks didn't know they were even going on because they're so ignorant about politics. And so it was done in their name on their watch. Whether they fully supported it, I can't say, but it happened almost as though people didn't know what was going on, if that makes sense. So I'm not sure I'm ready to concede that people in their heart of hearts don't believe in integration. It's just their control. It's always been that way. Now, I will say this, Mark, back in the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, there was tremendous resistance on the part of white people whenever a black person moved into their neighborhood. You're absolutely correct. You lived through all that because you're from Chicago.
A lot of that was before my time. But you totally, I agree with you. Keep going.
Yeah. So the whole history of the South Side is of that moment where, follow me on this, first black families started moving west, let's say, and then white families moved out in rapid fashion, and so there's that western expansion, and older Chicago residents know what I'm talking about, where the racial dividing line might have started off as Halstead, let's say, and then it moved west to Ashland, and then it moved further west to Damon, and then it moved further west to Western, and then to Kedzie, etc. And so this is a progression of neighborhoods changing that happened in the 60s and 70s and 80s even. And now we're seeing, at least on the north side, the reverse. And I've written about this in the past, Mark. I found this astounding. White people moving into an area that was black, which the rule of thumb back in the 80s when I first moved to Chicago is that would never happen. And what we saw on the north side.
These are different white people. That's not the white folks from the 50s and the 40s and the 60s, though.
Yeah, I know. You always tell me that, too, Ed. Different white people, like what they're their grandkids or their...
Yeah, they're from Iowa. They're from Wisconsin. These folks were born post-civil rights generation, so they see things differently. But not to cut you off. And in fact, we have to cut you off. It's gone too long. Can I do a part 3 with you, Ben?
Sure.
I mean, we're going to continue this conversation about integration. So, Ben, just give me a second, and we'll continue the conversation in a minute.